Week 2 in the National Football League was an eventful one at that, and a pretty good one for me. I'm not going to waste any time. Let's get right into it. Kicking things off with the Philadelphia Eagles on Thursday Night Football, running the L out of the ball against the Minnesota Vikings. Now, the Vikings were able to backdoor cover. The line was 7. Philly wins by 6, 34-28. Now, yes, Jalen Hurts did not look good at the start of the first quarter, but Minnesota was playing a lot like New England, played Philadelphia in week 1. A lot of that, eight drop back, 9 drop back, 2 to 3 man pass rush, and really forced Philadelphia to be patient, giving a lot of the Josh Allen, a lot of the Patrick Mahomes treatment, forced them to not make mistakes. And the Eagles and offensive coordinator Brian Johnson smartly took that approach and used the best offensive line in football and ran the ball down Minnesota's throat. Minnesota did not really make an adjustment in the second half. DeAndre Swift finished with over 100 yards rushing easily, and the Eagles almost had 300 yards rushing as a team and just took it to the teeth of Minnesota. Now, that defense also led by Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis up front, Josh Sweat. They had a hell of a night. They created turnovers, and even with the loss of Avonte Maddox in the secondary, which you could tell they missed desperately in the second half, even with the loss of Reed Blankenship in the secondary, I really thought the Philadelphia defensive line took the game over and won the game for them, winning the game in the trenches. Offensive line running game, defensive line getting out of the quarterback, making Kirk Cousins uncomfortable, because outside of Justin Jefferson, Minnesota did not have a lot going in the passing game. And so, I talk a lot about offensive minds and being explosive and scoring points. Sometimes you can be explosive by running the football and being able to put up 34 points. And by the way, a missed field goal by Jake Elliott, a long one, or they would have 37. Being able to put up that amount of points by controlling the football, to me, is a good sign. I know a lot of people are saying Jalen Hurts isn't playing great, and I think he's seeing some different defenses. He looked a little bit more comfortable to me in the second half as opposed to the whole game against New England. And Philadelphia has an opportunity to get right against Tampa Bay next Monday night on Monday Night Football. For Minnesota, the concern is we can score, we can't stop anybody. And now you're facing the Chargers, who we'll get to in a second. This is a very interesting game come Sunday in Minnesota. Next game. Now, I got this one wrong. I had the Lions winning. Seattle played really well. I said this needed to be a bounce back game for the Seahawks. They looked bad against the Rams week 1, and Geno Smith needed to come out and play well, and boy, did he ever. He even lost DK Metcalf for a little bit of time in that game. Their defense stepped up big in the second half with a big pick 6 on Jared Goff, his first interception in, something like 500 attempts. And the Lions in the second half were really rattled, and they were really stumbled by that Seattle pass rush. Now, Jared Goff made a lot of key big throws to Laporta, the tight end, Josh Reynolds, when Amon St. Brown went out with cramps, and the Lions got back in the ball game, but they were not able to pull it off in overtime. Obviously, the pass to Tyler Lockett, boom, touchdown, Seattle wins. And for the second straight year now, Seattle goes on the road, west to east coast, in the Dome in Detroit, and was a shootout with the Lions. And Geno Smith plays as well as he did in this game than he did all of last year. And if that continues, I'm a little bit worried about Seattle's defense. They have not looked good. As I mentioned, they looked good in spurts in the second half against Detroit. But the Lions and Seattle are very similar teams to me. They have very capable quarterbacks. They have very good weapons. The question is, are they going to be able to get enough stops? And they feel like sort of a 9-10 win team to me. Very similar. We'll see if Seattle can get the run game going with Kenneth Walker. For Detroit, the concern is David Montgomery went down with an injury. How long is he out for? Next game. I thought I had this one. I had Green Bay on the road beating Atlanta, and Jordan Love outplayed Desmond Ridder for 3 quarters. But in the NFL, there are 4 quarters of a football game. I don't think Brandon Staley of the Chargers knows that. But Green Bay went into a show in the second half. Jordan Love, they started putting pressure on him, didn't win his defense. He started to look uncomfortable, and without his left tackle, David Bakhtiari, without Christian Watson, without Aaron Jones, I just think it was a little bit too much for Green Bay to overcome. Saying that, with a young quarterback like Jordan Love, and I've been saying all year, Jordan Love, he sat for what was it? 3 years in Green Bay behind Rodgers, and what like Rodgers did for Brett Favre. I think year 4, you got to come out, you got to see it, you got to get the ball right. But with all of these young pieces, a very young offense and a very average offensive line, you're going to have up and downs. I think Atlanta still needs to use Bijan Robinson more than they have. Listen, we know about the running back shelf life. Nick Chubb went down. Saquon Barkley went down. Derrick Henry is probably bound to go down at some point this year for Tennessee. We know the shelf life for running backs isn't long. Use them while you add them. Bijan Robinson, to me, more than Drake London, more than Kyle Pitts, is the most explosive piece on Atlanta's offense. Desmond Ridder still does not look comfortable, but at the end of the day, Atlanta is 2-0. Speaking of looking comfortable, we all said going into the year, Tampa Bay has great weapons. They have a pretty good team. The question mark is going to be how consistent can Baker Mayfield play? And for 2 games, Baker Mayfield has been very consistent. The Tampa Bay offense has looked good. They're getting turnovers, and they're 2-0. Now, they did play Minnesota, who's an absolute choke job, and they also played Chicago, who just does not have the right coach. And I don't think Justin Fields is going to work in Chicago. He may work somewhere else, but I think the Bears need to pivot. I think they need to get an offensive coach. I've been saying for years, I think they made a mistake firing Matt Nagy. A lot of people banged on Matt Nagy, but he did make the playoffs with Mitch Trubisky. Obviously it was in a down year in the NFC North, but they did win 12 games. Justin Fields looked more comfortable as a rookie to me than he did in his second year with Luke Getsy, and he is just not seeing the field well. He's rattled. They have not implemented DJ Moore. From what I've seen, in these games, I thought DJ Moore was going to help Justin Fields. I thought he was going to be his A.J. Brown, his Stephon Diggs, his DeAndre Hopkins. Usually wide receivers make an impact with a new team right away. DJ Moore has not done that. I am very concerned if I'm a Bears fan. The Packers at 1-1 have looked better than the Bears. Minnesota at 0-2. Their defense at times has looked good. Their offense has definitely looked better than Chicago. And we know how well the Lions have played, obviously knocking off Kansas City and then losing in overtime to Seattle. So Chicago looks bad. Their defense does not look great, and they have a defensive-minded head coach, and that concerns me. This is the game I should have bet in replace of the Chargers. I should have taken Buffalo. Now, it was a big line. It was an 8.5 to a 9-point line. I don't love taking those big lines, but I should have taken it here. We all knew Buffalo was going to bounce back against Vegas. Vegas scared me early. Devontae Adams caught a touchdown. They were up 7-0. But after that, it was Josh Allen. It was Stephon Diggs. It was Gabe Davis. And they kept Josh Allen under control. They ran the ball with James Cook. And Ken Dorsey, stick to the run. And if Dorsey's going to be a good offensive coordinator for Buffalo, this is what he's going to have to do. Stick to the run. Use more tight ends. Play action. Short passes. Just get Josh Allen in a rhythm and take out your way to deep shots. Don't ask Josh Allen to be the hero. Don't ask him to drop the ball back 50 times. And this is the formula for Buffalo to win. Now, they play Washington on the road. Vegas goes home and plays Pittsburgh. Those are 2 very interesting matchups in week 3. Jimmy Garoppolo has now played terrible for Vegas. They beat Denver, who we'll talk about. That score didn't indicate how bad Denver obviously played in the second half. Now, they got blown out by Buffalo, who was on a mission, who was angry against the Jets. I'm very interested to see how they play Pittsburgh Sunday night down there in Las Vegas. Surprising defensive game, though. Chris Jones looked great. Travis Kelce caught a touchdown. Chiefs beat the Jags 17-9. The story so far early in the season for Kansas City is not Mahomes, who has now looked great in his first 2 games. It's the young defense who, last year was giving up yards and points all over the yard. They are flying around. They're making tackles. They're being aggressive. They are a really well-coached defense right now by Steve Spagnuolo. They're giving Trevor Lawrence a little bit of a fit. Now, Doug Peterson has never been Andy Reid. That's not a knock on Doug. I don't think it's a knock on Lawrence. I still think they're going to be fine. And I think Kansas City, by the way, was more motivated by the fact they lost to Detroit opening night. They knew, like Cincinnati, they could not start 0-2. So I think that was another motivating factor. Chris Jones made huge plays, took apart that Jacksonville offensive line, which we all know is the weakness of the Jags offense. Now, Calvin Ridley did not get much involved. This was more of a Christian Kirk game. I expect the offense to get better as the year goes on. Their schedule is good. I'm not worried about Jacksonville, and Kansas City has Chicago at home next week. They are a huge favorite, and I'm interested to see, where that line finishes. Because right now they're at 12.5, and I think Kansas City could potentially blow Chicago out. Now, this next one, if it wasn't for this, all my best bets would have hit. Again, I had Kansas City -3 against Jacksonville. That did cover. I had the Chargers -3 against Tennessee, and I had them. They were up 10 early in the second half. DeAndre Hopkins wasn't doing anything. Derrick Henry wasn't doing much. The Titans could not move the ball. And Brandon Staley is a defensive-minded head coach. And for the life of me, I do not understand why they do not make adjustments. It doesn't matter if it's the Jacksonville game. It didn't matter if it was the Dolphins game. It didn't matter if it was any game Brandon Staley has ever coached. They come in with a game plan. They don't move off the game plan, and teams expose them in the second half. When you are a defensive-minded head coach, your offense is not supposed to be significantly better than your defense. They've scored 58 points this year. They haven't turned the ball over. Kellen Moore, Justin Herbert looked great. They were going up and down the field on Tennessee. But Mike Vrabel, the ultimate adjuster, with Ryan Tannehill, who can't even freaking move in the pocket, was able to dot up the Chargers in the second half. The Chargers are an absolute disaster. Remind me to never, ever bet the Chargers again for as long as I live. I don't care if Brandon Staley's the coach. Some people don't trust Atlanta. Let's face it, I don't trust the Chargers, and I never will. It was a complete disaster. Shout out to Tennessee for winning the game 27-24 in overtime. Brandon Staley, you cost me a perfect best bet for the week. Speaking of best bets, I hit this one. I called Indy demolishing Houston. Everybody thought C.J. Stroud at home. C.J. Stroud was going to look good. I said, be careful. Indy played well at home against Jacksonville in week 1. Anthony Richardson, 2 early rushing touchdowns, and then he got a concussion. If there's one thing that concerns me right now about Anthony Richardson, because I love him, I love Shane Steichen, I think he's raw, and I said, even without Jonathan Taylor, because of Anthony Richardson's dual threat ability and because of the running back position in the NFL, they are not going to miss a lot in the run game. So far for 2 games, I've been proven right on that. The score doesn't indicate here. Indy dominated Houston. For the most part, this game was over at halftime. C.J. Stroud for a lot of empty calorie passing yards, yet he already has more 300-yard passing games than Justin Fields. So again, if that doesn't tell you the story of what's going on in Chicago, then I don't know what will. But C.J. Stroud still does not look like he sees the field well. He looked like a rookie, and again, he's with a defensive-minded head coach. D'Amico Ryans. We all like the energy he brought in San Francisco. We all think he's going to eventually turn around the culture in Houston. But this is not a good start. And for a team that I thought this year, upgraded their talent, that they could win, 5-6 games, that prediction is not looking great right now. And then I called Baltimore. I said Baltimore's on the road against Cleveland and Pittsburgh in week 4 and week 5. They have Indy at home this week. They should win that game. But when your first 3 divisional games, within the first 5 weeks are all on the road, you've got to get one. And Cincinnati came in here limping, and Joe Burrow does not look right. And Lamar Jackson's going to have a really good year with Todd Monken, an offensive coordinator. And the fact of the matter is, as much as we love Cincinnati, when Lamar Jackson is healthy, you can make the argument Baltimore is just better than Cincinnati. Their talent may not be, obviously, Burrow, Chase, Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Mixon offensively, Orlando Brown, the left tackle, defensively, Trey Anderson is still there. But Baltimore, man, with Zay Flowers and with Duvernay and with Beckham coming back and Mark Andrews and the running game they still have with Justice Hill and Gus Edwards, even though they did lose J.K. Dobbins, Baltimore is a very dangerous team. I'll say it again. When Lamar Jackson was healthy last year for the first 10 games, they were the only team in the National Football League to hold a double-digit lead in the first 10 games of the season last year. I don't know if that is the case again this year. I believe that they were up by double digits at one point, 27-17 against Cincinnati. Cincinnati got another backdoor touchdown. Very competitive game in the second half. But for the most part in the first half, once again, Joe Burrow only had 30 yards. Is Cap more hurt than we all think? Is he in danger of not playing this Monday night against the Rams? Is Cincinnati falls 0-3? Cincinnati could fall off a cliff here for the remainder of the season. There's only been one team, and I think it was actually the Chargers, who got hot after they started 0-4 and made the postseason. We've seen teams like Indianapolis start 1-5 and finish 10-6 and make the postseason. So it's possible. But Cincinnati is in a whole lot of trouble right now. They cannot move the ball, and Joe Burrow is not healthy, and teams are just blitzing Cincinnati. And from not playing in the preseason, they were completely out of sync, and they played two big divisional games right out of the gate. If Burrow plays Monday night against the Rams, Super Bowl rematch from a couple years ago, I don't care if Aaron Donald is still there. That Rams defense is still not great. Burrow needs to take advantage of it and put up good numbers. Speaking of San Francisco, was I impressed by the Rams in the first half? Then they fell apart in the second half, and this is an example of a very young team. Niners win, Rams backdoor cover. There was a lot of backdoor covers this weekend. Minnesota, the Rams, Tennessee, I would say too, backdoor cover. New England tried to backdoor cover at the end of the game, obviously with that lateral. Arizona covered against the Giants. So, the Washington, Denver, Denver was favored by 4. They almost tried to get a touchdown at the end of the game in the Hail Mary. They had a chance to cover. There was a lot of backdoor covers, as well as I mentioned, with the Rams. They were down by 10, kick a field goal at the end of the game. But Brock Purdy looks good. San Francisco owns the Rams. They adjusted at the start of the second half, and San Francisco just beating people up. And now they face a Saquon Barkley-less Giants team, who of course made an incredible comeback against Arizona, because Arizona decided we cannot win this game. We have to tank for Caleb Williams. That's what the second half was. It wasn't what the Giants did to Arizona. You could tell by Arizona's body language. They did not want to move the ball. They did not want to win the game. And so Giants had a comeback. They win the game 31-28. They were still down 28-7 to Arizona, and I'm not impressed with Daniel Jones. Speaking of Russell Wilson, he looked great in the first half, and then Denver fell apart again in the second half. Just like Russell Wilson looked great in the first half against Vegas, fell apart in the second half. He is bailing out way too early in the pocket. There are guys open down the field. The offensive line is blocking at a decent rate. He is not comfortable right now inside the pocket. I think Sean Payton essentially needs to get him on the move ASAP, and let's get Russell Wilson outside the pocket. But Washington, after a bad start, they got their stuff together. Sam Howell played great in the second half, and Washington was able to pick up the 2-point victory, 35-33. Zach Wilson saw ghosts. Dallas wins 30-10. Dallas looks real good. The Jets stick with Zach Wilson. There's not a lot to really elaborate on that game. Dallas killed the Jets. I think we all kind of thought it could have been a defensive battle. It was the only way the Jets were going to win the game. Dallas' offense is not look great against the Giants, but they looked pretty good. And I think the Jets season, for all intents and purposes, is over. They may win 6 or 7 games, but if you have Zach Wilson as your quarterback, it's not a good thing. How about Miami? I bet them -2. They covered against New England. Now, New England tried for the comeback, obviously, that hook and ladder to the Wyman at the end of the game. But Miami is just so fast and clever offensively. When Tua Tagovailoa is healthy, he's undefeated against Bill Belichick. He looks like an MVP with Mike McDaniel. And when you have those weapons, New England is a great rookie corner in Christian Gonzalez. But when you have that weapon in Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, it's very hard to cover both of those receivers and Raheem Mostert out of the backfield, who is a big game. And then Vic Fangio defensively is blitzing Miami more than they have in the past. They're rattling Mac Jones, who did not play great in the first half. New England regresses back to the mean where they're going to play good defense. They don't have great receivers. They're going to try to outscore you, and they're going to beat bad teams with bad quarterbacks because their defense is going to take advantage and create turnovers. It's what they always do. They're going to destroy Zach Wilson. The line is 2.5 right now. Patriots and Jets. I'm already going to tell you, I'm going to bet that game. I'm taking New England, and New England may be the most predictable team in the National Football League. And as we said with Miami, when they are healthy, they are better than Buffalo. No surprises there. I got this one wrong. I give Carolina one more chance. Their offense looks bad. I think this is the one division I got wrong. Seemingly the Saints, Falcons, and Bucks are all 2-0. Carolina is 0-2. I thought Bryce Young was going to come out of the gate. I thought he was going to look decent. Frank Reich is an offensive coach, but they are not clever. They were stymied. Now, I'll say this. The Saints offense doesn't look great either. And the best team out of the first 2 weeks in that division has been Tampa with Baker Mayfield. We don't think he's going to be consistent enough. At this point, I think the Saints are still favored in their division, but I don't like their offense. I don't like Dennis Allen. Alvin Kamara will add a new element. I get it. They didn't have Jamal Williams last night either, but Derek Carr just looks like he's not seeing the field great that well. And the Saints offense is kind of based on a Shaheed or an Olave big play over the top to get yards. Otherwise, they cannot move the ball. And then you got Deshaun Watson. Now, the Nick Chubb injury happened, and just like the Giants and Saquon Barkley, who, of course, is going to miss a couple weeks with an injury, there's a lot of people flipping out about the running back position. And when we talked about this a month ago, I said, this is why you don't give a running back a second contract. It's important to have a good running game. But look at teams like Philadelphia. Look at teams like Baltimore. Look at teams like Kansas City. Look at teams right now like Indianapolis, Washington, Miami. They're not using all pro backs. In a lot of cases, they're using a speedster or they're using a committee of backs or they're using a back that just fits their scheme. And they are running the football just as effectively as a Tennessee or a Cleveland. And Jerome Ford looks great in the run game last night. By the way, that kid Warren looks pretty good for Pittsburgh. So I'm not concerned about the run game on the Browns. It doesn't matter if you have Nick Chubb or not. This is all about Deshaun Watson, who looks slow. He does not look comfortable in the pocket. And Cleveland looks like that offense, which I know they're trying to scheme out more empty spread with Stefanski. They do not look great. They do not look in sync. And I don't know what it is, right? Very predictable play calling when it comes to the Browns. First down, run the ball. Same thing with Pittsburgh. Second and 8, run the ball. Ask your quarterback to play hero on third down. And for an offensive mind like Kevin Stefanski, and you're seeing it a little bit more with Watson, they're spreading the football out a little bit more. But I just like to see more creative and more clever play calling, and it's not happening. And I don't think the Browns have the right answer coach right now. I'm willing to give Watson one more chance. I'm willing to give him to the end of the year. I think he needs a new coach or at least a new play caller to see what they can drum up offensively. But Pittsburgh did not play well. Outside of George Pickens, they don't have a great wide receiver when Deontay Johnson is out. That Warren kid is better than Najee Harris. Kenny Pickett looks over his skis. Matt Canada looks like a bad offensive coordinator. And last night's Monday night game is what happens when you have two bad offensive coordinators. 4 turnovers in the first quarter, sloppy quarterback play, big plays by TJ Watt and the Pittsburgh defense, changing the game. and I bet Pittsburgh plus 2.5 because I said the Browns did not look good in week 1, even with the rain. They're going into Pittsburgh. They still had to prove they can beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh was embarrassed by San Francisco. You knew that you were going to get their best, which was not great offensively, but defensively, they were good enough to win the game. So as a recap, I went 10-6 in the money line. I hit Philadelphia, missed Detroit, missed Green Bay, missed Chicago. I hit Buffalo, I hit Kansas City, missed the Chargers, I hit Indy, hit Baltimore, hit San Fran, missed Denver. I hit the Giants, I hit Dallas, I hit Miami, I missed Carolina, but I hit Pittsburgh. I went 10-6 in the money line once again, 9-7 last week. Puts me to 19-13 so far, first 2 weeks in the money line. And best bets, we are 6-10 after only going 2 for 5 in week 1. I went 4 for 5 in week 2. Once again, Kansas City covers against Jacksonville. Indy covers against Houston. Pittsburgh plus 2.5 against Cleveland Monday night. And then Sunday night, obviously, Miami, the -2, covering against New England. My one miss, once again, being Brandon Staley and the Los Angeles Chargers, who I should have never bet. I should have taken Buffalo, the -8 points against Vegas, and I would have had a perfect week. Like that clip from the Brands World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brands World podcast right here on YouTube.